We learned so much last week. We hit on physical and emotional intimacy right off the top, finances, spiritual connection. What am I forgetting? I'm forgetting something.
We talked about money.
Money, yeah. We talked about all this communication. So today, I gotta put our 5 sort of top conflicts in marriage. Okay. One of them is definitely involves children, right? But it's really the conflict of time. You've got these stresses in society. You've got your work. You've got your kids. Stress on the marriage. Why is kids or, this family dynamic, why is that such a conflict in marriage?
Oh boy, you just opened up a huge can of worms.
Yeah.
How much time do we have?
Well, for one thing, time's a limited commodity, right? So whenever time's on the table, there's going to be stress on it because you got to make a choice. But I guess I want to also put on the table right at the beginning, I think one of the reasons that all our discussions around children is so important, are so intense, is children are important.
Yes.
And it touches on issues of identity and self-worth. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. How when we start seeing our children not as stewardship, but putting our identity on them, it gets really intense.
Well, and our value. If our value is tied up in who our kids are and our relationship with our kids, I think that complicates things too.
Sure it does.
But I mean, let's just be honest. Most families today have this huge pull on their time, their energy, and it's not just time; it's energy. And
that's right.
By the time you get home from work, if you're working outside the home and you've got kids, you've got financial pressures. A lot of people are involved in community work, church work. That's another pull. It's really hard to carve out that time and that space to keep your marriage strong and healthy.
Well, let's talk about that. How do we prioritize our marriage? Like, how do you actually, in all of the demands of life, including raising children, if you have some, how do you prioritize your marriage? What does that look like?
Well, it starts off by prioritizing your marriage. Like to paraphrase Jesus, he said, "What does it profit you if you gain the whole world, but you lose your soul?" Well, from a marriage point of view, like, what does it profit you if you gain whatever it is you're after in terms of work and your children are on the honor roll, but you lose your marriage? And the marriage predates the children. It's intended to create a safe, secure environment for them to grow. And then the marriage outlasts the children in the home. So that helps also. Like, I'm prioritizing what's truly lasts, what envelops the children. And so to forsake that, to make the children the first priority is a mistake. And here's the deal. Kids love when mom and dad have a good marriage. Kids thrive when there's more security in the home. Kids just love it. And there's lots of research on that. So it's worth working on your marriage if you want to bless your children. It's not an either or here.
That is so good. Sharol, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, because we've had to be very intentional about it's not clock time.
It's not clock time.
We got to be clear on that. You can't say, I prioritize you by spending more time with you than I do with our 3-year-old. Like, you just can't do that. It's not clock time. So you have to find ways of showing priority to your spouse in ways that don't involve, especially if your children are young. We're in a season, we're empty nest, we have nothing but time for each other. But that wasn't always the case. We both worked outside the home. We were both committed to really doing a great job with our kids, our 2 boys. So we developed a bit of a formula because we lost each other for a while there.
We did. We went through really dark passages where we had drifted for many things.
Which is easy to happen.
Happens easily,
Okay, so what's the formula?
Our formula is, and the reason that we discovered this is because we had a pattern of once a year we would go away for a weekend, talk about our marriage, how we were doing, what we wanted to happen in the year to come. We called it our State of the Union weekend. And we were away on one of those weekends when we realized we had just drifted so far apart. So we've built that pattern in. I think after that sort of experience, we learned we had to do more than just once a year. So we started building in 15 minutes a day where we said non-logistical talk, no talk about who's going to pick up the kids or the groceries or the dry cleaning or, who's going to take the dog to the vets, but just like knee to knee, eyeball to eyeball, how was your day and how are you and I missed you, and those kinds of conversations. So 15 minutes a day, a half an hour or a date night, half a day or a date night a week if you can do it, and we had to work really hard on that one. And then we tried to take a day a month for the two of us, because this friendship piece, we talked about it last week on one of the shows, how the friendship can be just kind of the sex and the romance come and go, but the friendship can stay the same. But you have to do things that fuel that friendship.
Right.
So
like
once
any
a month,
friendship.
we would try to just do something that we used to do before we had kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
that little
love
15 minutes
that.
a day, half a day a week, or an evening a week, a day a month, and then the weekend a year.
Really
was our formula.
That is really good, because you can say you prioritize your marriage, but actually, you've got to actually put it on the calendar.
Yeah, you do.
Right? Like and put it in the budget.
Yes, that's right.
Because if you don't do those things, the priority, no matter what it is, won't happen. And then I agree, we can lose each other in those years, especially of raising children.
Oh. It's the number one. There's a big bulge of divorce about year 4 in Canada, and that's about unresolved differences. The next big bulge of divorce is about year 25. And in our estimation, that's completely a result of drift. That's when people go, I don't know him anymore. I don't love her anymore. We've just become different people. Well, how did you become different people? You know, it didn't happen overnight. And so I think something to counter the drift that busyness creates, and we all contend with that.
That's so good. Another aspect I'd say that is a common stress that can cause the drift to happen is work. Or the demands of work. Like, what if you live, you know, in Ontario, any big city, Vancouver, Calgary, you're commuting to get into the downtown. You got this, you know, 2 hours a day of commuting.
Oh, man.
Those things cause drift or drain. What advice do you give to couples with the stress of work? Especially in the years where you got to make some money.
Well, you know, work is good. God worked. We're in God's image. When we work, I think we feel complete and whole, you know? I mean, whatever our work is, in the home, outside the home, I think. But it's hard to keep it in its correct perspective. So I think one of the hard things we often say to couples is, maybe you can't have it all. So you need to ask, so why are we working all these hours? And, you know, what's the old line? You know, I climbed the ladder, and then I realized it was leaning on the wrong wall, you know? So some sober conversations about what are we really doing, and is this the priority we want to have? So that would be a really important part. And then the identity piece, again, see, if we find our identity in our work, like I'm a mechanic, I'm a nurse, I'm an educator, you know, whatever it is, I'm a pastor. If that's your identity, it will always swamp everything else. Because to dial that back means I'm losing my identity.
I'm losing myself.
So if you see it as a stewardship, and I love that word, our children are a stewardship, and so is your work. It's something that you've been entrusted with, and we should use it for God's good.
Love that so much. Well, we're going to be right back to continue with more tips for balancing kid stuff, work stuff. Stay tuned.
Is your marriage thriving? We're here to help you make your relationship stronger. Call our prayer lines today at 1-855-759-0700 or visit 700club.ca and request Love and Marriage, a powerful resource and tool to use on your journey from striving to thriving to make your marriage stronger. It's yours free when you call today.
Well, I just love what you just shared about even just how to prioritize our marriage in very practical ways in all the different seasons. You and I are both in the kind of the empty nest side. All right, my last one's getting married shortly. And it's, I'm telling you, hold on there. If you're in those raising kids years, hold on. It's the best years. You've got more time and space. But right now, we're talking about the pressures and stresses of work. Sometimes, how do you prioritize like that job? You just got that job offer, the thing you dreamed of. Like, what do you do with all that stuff?
You're looking at me? Well, both Neil and I had pretty high-powered, intense careers for most of our marriage. We've only done this together for the last 16 years. Prior to that, we had very different careers, but they were both really important to us, and we've both felt called to them. So the challenge for us was, how do we be a really healthy family and do a great job of raising our children while still living into our callings and our giftedness and the work that we loved? The solution we came up with was, we couldn't both front burner our careers at the same time. We kind of had to go through seasons where one of us would front burner, the other would back burner, and we would move according to kind of who was front burnering and who was back burnering. The back burner person would take more care of the home and the family and be more flexible with the kids, and that worked for us. I'm not sure that works, but I think some couples feel like it's kind of one and done. You decide whose career is most important, and then for the rest of your marriage, that's how it is. And I just feel like marriage and family is way more fluid than that.
Yeah. I love that so much because that is a tension. And like you say, you might just decide, oh, well, his job is always going to be more important. So the woman may feel resentful or vice versa. Or vice versa, that they have to maybe back burner. And I'm with you on that. And I always tell younger men and women, like in many ways, you can have it all, but not all at once.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? You can have that career, but there's a time and place where that's not the most important thing.
How have you done this? How have you balanced career, marriage, family?
You know what? So I would say for me, it came down to what we valued and even what I valued. I really wanted to be able to be home to raise my kids, but the reality was I worked most of those years. But it was about prioritizing and realizing, because I've always loved my work as well. My husband's very supportive in that, but I also love being home. So I just kind of took the approach, I can't do it all the time. And I settled into peace about that there's a season when I backburnered my career so I could actually be home and more flexible with the kids. Then there was a season where I could step more into my career. My husband supported me with that. And it was an ebb and flow thing. And it was always about keeping, though, the family a priority. That's what really restrained me from, in many ways, taking jobs that was not the right time to take. And the Lord always provided through those seasons.
And when you're trying to make these difficult choices, stewarding your children is a high and godly priority. I know we always felt that. I think that's what I heard you bearing witness to. So, but to see it as a stewardship and it'll go through a season. Can I tell you one tool that really, really helped me?
Please.
And I went through a professional burnout phase. I was out of the marketplace for almost 2 years. And I was home with the kids. And what I learned in reflection was how I got to burnout and overwork was the question I only asked was, can I do this? And so everything that came to me was a question of my competence. And of course, if you have a little success and you're willing to work hard, people will give you more. I guarantee you. I mean, when you need a job done, you look for somebody who's already doing a bunch of stuff. So people kept giving me stuff, and I started to see, oh, this is my ego, this is my identity. It's a measure of my competence for me to say yes. Later on, after burnout, after I started to say, I got to live a different way, here's the question. Is this wise?
That's good.
Not can I do it, more should I do it? Is it wise? And part of that wisdom is it good for us? And is it good for our home? That's the question to ask. See, because the people at work will just tell you, hey, there's more money, there's a promotion, they won't ask you the is it wise question.
That is so good, Neil. I think we have a fair number of people in our audience that would be in retirement years. You've mentioned identity. Often our identity is linked to what we do because it brings us value and worth. This is not just who I am, this is what I do. So what happens when you're not doing that thing anymore? Can you speak to that and how it maybe even affects marriage? But this identity question is so important.
Yeah, well, we're going to find out ourselves. We're going to reach our retirement years probably down the road, but it does. I'm not sure I have any advice on that, to be honest, but because I think it starts before retirement.
I think that is the advice.
Maybe. So those of us who are in our work years, let's make sure that our identity is grounded, first of all, in Christ. Man, that frees you up. When your identity is first and foremost as a child of God, a daughter of God, a son of God. First of all, that makes God your father-in-law, as Gary Thomas likes to say, which is a great perspective. But I think it does help you keep things. So I would say those of us who are in working years, make sure we don't let that become our identity. For those of us that are retired and
I got a couple things to say.
Do you? Oh, good.
I love to use this phrase, just start where you are and do what you can.
That's good.
And what I like about that is it starts, here. And at a certain stage of our life, we can't do what I used to do.
Right.
And then because of the way we're gifted and all the rest, I can't do what you can do, and you can't do what Sharol does. Start where you are, do what you can, no matter what your age is.
That's right.
I think that would be really a good thing to tuck away.
I think that's so good. And you know, your ministry, Family Life Canada, you've been doing this a while, 16 years.
Well, yeah.
13 here. And
13 years?
We did
okay.
4 at a
Tell us what resources or what are things at Family Life Canada that can help some of our viewers watching today?
Well, my favorite thing we do is we have grown a network of mentors across the country. They're part of our team of what we call home builders. So there's over 4,000 men and women across this country who have said, I'm going to get into the game helping marriages and families in my neighborhood, in my church, in my community. And we love those people. So our job is to resource those people so that they can do their ministry in their communities.
That's amazing.
And we're trying to resource churches as well. We're trying to partner with 500 churches across Canada. We're about halfway there to coach these churches to do marriage ministry that fits their church, fits their community. It's not a program. We'll coach you. So check that out. And there's direct resources, podcasts, articles, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, great. And thank you for being with us.